You're in a silent interrogation room. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. A man sits across from you, calm as still water, dressed like a ghost of forgotten luxury, tailored suit, antique cufflinks, a fedora placed neatly on the table beside him. He doesn't blink much. He doesn't flinch, and he knows things about you he shouldn't. Not from surveillance, not from guesswork, from something else. He leans forward and tells you something you've never admitted to anyone, something dark, something buried, and he says it with no judgment, only a trace of amusement, like he's not surprised at all. That man is Raymond Red Readington, and in that moment you feel something strange. You should feel fear, you should feel violated, but instead you feel exposed and safe. How can someone so dangerous make you feel understood? How can a man wanted by every major intelligence agency become the most trusted confidant in the room? That's the paradox of Reddington. He's not just a criminal mastermind. He's not just a walking dossier of espionage, blackmail, and blood money. He's something deeper, something more unsettling. He's the embodiment of a question most people don't want to ask. What if the villain understands you better than the hero ever could? Reddington isn't merely operating outside the law. He's operating outside the moral architecture we're taught to believe in. He breaks rules not just to survive, but to reveal the hollowness of those rules. He kills to save, betrays to protect, lies to get closer to the truth. He makes you question the very nature of right and wrong. You watch him tell a grieving woman the cold truth about her son's death. No sugarcoating, no soft edges, and she doesn't slap him. She listens. Because Reddington doesn't coddle pain, he surgically slices through it. You watch him offer brutal honesty to people drowning in their own self-deception, and somehow they thank him for it. Why? Because in a world full of people wearing masks, he's mastered the art of weaponizing authenticity. He knows the darkness inside people, not because he judges it, but because he's made peace with his own. He speaks from a place you don't want to visit, but can't look away from, and that's what makes him terrifying. Not his power, not his reach, not his history, but the fact that he sees you, truly sees you, underneath the performance, beneath the justifications, past the good intentions and polished lies. And when he speaks, when he tells stories about old lovers, lost friends, unfinished wars, you get the creeping sense that he's not just narrating his life, he's narrating something about yours. Like he's been where you're going, like he's made every choice you were too afraid to make, like he knows exactly what you'd do if you thought no one was watching. Now pause, really sit with that. How would you behave if someone understood your shadow better than you do? What would happen if the man you're warned about becomes the only one you trust? Is that charisma, manipulation, or something darker? Because here's the deeper question Reddington forces us to face. What if the devil doesn't tempt you with lies, but with the truth? There's a reason why watching him is addictive. It's not just the violence or the intrigue or the smooth monologues. It's that eerie feeling that somehow he's more honest than anyone around him. That in a world full of masks, the most dangerous man is also the most real. But where does that come from? Why does his presence demand both fear and reverence? What trauma forged that kind of psychological steel? And what does it say about us that we're drawn to someone like him? Maybe the truth is this. Reddington doesn't just reflect the darkness of the world. He reflects the parts of ourselves we've hidden so well. We've forgotten they were even there. And when those parts get spoken aloud, when they're finally named, without judgment or shame, they don't shrink, they awaken. So ask yourself, are you afraid of Raymond Reddington? Or are you afraid of the version of yourself he might unlock? The difference might be the most important thing you'll ever understand. You were taught that good and evil are separate, that justice wears a badge and evil hides in the shadows, that criminals are wrong and heroes are right. It's neat, it's comforting, it makes the world feel safe. even when it's not. But then Reddington walks into the room, and everything breaks. He doesn't fit the binary. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He doesn't pretend to be good. And somehow, he operates with more integrity than the system he defies. So what's really going on here? Why does this man, who exists in moral gray zones, feel more real than the so-called righteous? To understand this, you have to dig beneath the surface of crime dramas and FBI task forces. You have to confront something buried in the architecture of the human psyche, a split Carl Jung called the shadow. According to Jung, every human being has a shadow self, a hidden part of the psyche that contains all the traits we deny, repress, or refuse to acknowledge. It's not just where your rage lives, it's where your desire for power hides. Your jealousy, your sadism, your need to dominate. But also your unapologetic hunger, your primal instincts, your untamed creativity. The problem isn't that we have a shadow. The problem is we pretend we don't. Reddington doesn't make that mistake. He's not confused about who he is. He's killed. He's lied. He's destroyed people's lives. But he's also saved people no one else could. Loved with intensity, grieved with depth, fought for things he believes in. And he never denies the darkness that powers him. He doesn't run from it. He integrates it. That's the psychological root of his power. In a world obsessed with virtue signaling, performative morality, and politically correct scripts, Reddington is disarming, because he embodies a deeper, more dangerous kind of honesty. He has faced his inner darkness and made it his ally. Where most people split themselves into parts, public mask versus private demons, he is whole, dangerous, yes, but whole, and that's rare. Most people are fragmented. Sartre called this bad faith, the self-deception we use to avoid confronting our own contradiction. We say we value honesty, but lie to our partners. We claim to be peaceful, but fantasize about revenge. We judge others for doing what we secretly wish we could. Reddington sees through all that, not because he's psychic, because he's stopped lying to himself. He has what Nietzsche would call a tragic wisdom, the kind of insight that comes from suffering, loss, and radical self-awareness. He knows the world isn't fair, that love doesn't always redeem, that innocence doesn't protect, that power is the only language some people understand. But instead of collapsing into despair, he builds a code, not a legal code, a personal one. And that's where the next layer of complexity unfolds. Reddington doesn't believe in institutional morality, but he does live by a code. He'll kill a man without blinking, but protect a child with his life. He'll betray an old friend, but show unwavering loyalty to someone he respects. He plays dirty, but often to serve a deeper sense of justice. Not the kind the courts recognize, the kind only someone who's been broken by the world can recognize. It's Schopenhauer's cruelty of existence. Life as suffering, nature as indifferent. And yet Reddington finds meaning not in denial of pain, but in navigating it with eyes open. He's not trying to fix the system. He's trying to operate in spite of it. You see, most people outsource morality to institutions. The law says it's okay, so it must be right. The religion says it's a sin, so it must be wrong. But what happens when those institutions are corrupt? What happens when the people who uphold them are more dangerous than the ones who break them? That's the world Reddington lives in. One where the lines are blurred, the heroes are compromised, and the villains are sometimes more honest than the saints. And in that world, survival requires a new psychology, one rooted not in naive idealism, but in clarity. Reddington isn't a cynic. He's a realist with a poet's soul. He sees the violence, the betrayal, the absurdity, and still believes in moments of beauty. Still values trust, loyalty, connection, but not because he's trying to win some moral contest. because he's been through hell and learned what actually matters. He tells stories, not to boast, but to teach, to remind people of the weight of their choices, the cost of compromise, the fragility of everything we take for granted. And that's what makes his darkness so profound. It's not performative. It's philosophical. It's not about shock value. It's about truth. Hard, painful, unvarnished truth. The kind most people spend their lives avoiding. So when you watch Reddington move through the world, disarming enemies with charm, manipulating outcomes like a grandmaster, you're not just watching a criminal at work. You're watching a man who has looked into the abyss, and instead of falling in, built a home there. But that raises an even darker question. If this kind of psychological integration is what gives Reddington his power, if his refusal to deny his shadow is what makes him so dangerous and magnetic, then what does that say about the rest of us? About our need to keep things simple, our fear of ambiguity, our hunger for clean labels and easy answers? Maybe Reddington isn't the anomaly. Maybe he's the truth we've all buried. And maybe, just maybe, the cost of pretending we're good is the very thing that keeps us weak. Look around you. People smile when they're dying inside. They say, it's fine when it's not. They follow rules that don't protect them, love people they don't trust, and repeat phrases like, I'm a good person, while doing things they'd never admit out loud. It's not evil. It's not corruption. It's self-preservation built on delusion. And it's everywhere. This is the hidden disease Raymond Reddington exposes, the psychological cost of pretending to be good while denying what you truly are. The cost isn't just internal. It reshapes entire cultures, systems, and relationships. It's not loud. It's silent. That's why it works. You see it in the boss who fires someone with a smile, in the spouse who lies to protect the relationship, in the politician who commits war crimes in the name of peace, in the friend who ghosts you and still thinks of themselves as kind. We're not taught to be whole. We're taught to be socially acceptable. And that training doesn't just silence our shadow. It feeds it. It makes it smarter, hungrier, more manipulative, because anything that's repressed doesn't disappear. It evolves in the dark. Psychologists call this moral licensing. The subconscious trick where doing something good gives you permission to do something bad. Ever notice how the people who donate the most are often the cruelest in private? How those who preach about empathy are sometimes the quickest to shame others? It's not hypocrisy. It's a psychological trap. The more you convince yourself you're good, the less you feel the need to confront your darkness, and the more disconnected you become from reality. This is where Reddington becomes more than a character. He becomes a mirror, a warning. He doesn't fall for these traps. He doesn't sanitize his past. He doesn't need to. His power comes from integration. He's not pretending. He's navigating. And you feel it. You feel it when he walks into a room, and everyone tenses, not because he's gonna hurt someone, but because they know he won't lie. He won't flatter. He won't play the game. That kind of psychological presence is unsettling, because most of us are playing the game all the time, and we've forgotten we're doing it. We use social media to project an image of ourselves. We edit our personalities depending on who we're with. We speak in scripts. We hide behind brands, causes, ideologies, and in doing so, we become strangers to ourselves. This is the quiet violence of modern life, the erosion of self through constant performance. Reddington violates that performance. He walks through life like someone who already died once and doesn't care about judgment anymore. He's not seeking approval. He's seeking impact. And that makes him dangerous in a way few people understand, because it's not his guns or secrets that give him power. It's his psychological freedom. He has nothing to prove, nothing to hide. That's what terrifies institutions. That's what rattles governments. That's what makes FBI agents both despise and depend on him. He's not shackled by the need to be seen as moral. He's driven by something far more powerful, meaning, and in a world obsessed with appearances, meaning is radioactive. But what happens when most people are not like him? What happens when we build a society where everyone is pretending? You get moral theater, you get hollow institutions, you get leaders who don't lead, and laws that don't protect. You get relationships that look perfect on Instagram and feel dead in person. You get a culture of deception so deep, even the deceivers don't know they're lying. That's the true consequence. And it's not a conspiracy. It's not evil by design. It's what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum. The void created when people lose connection to real values, and instead latch on to symbols, roles, and ideologies to feel alive. Reddington doesn't fill that void with religion or nationalism or identity politics. He fills it with story, with memory, with personal codes, with real loyalty, with choices that carry weight. He doesn't believe in virtue as a label. He believes in character as a practice, and that's what most people have forgotten. Because when your morality is performative, your life becomes hollow. And when your life is hollow, you'll cling to anything that gives you the illusion of depth, even if it's toxic, manipulative, or violent. That's why people get addicted to narcissists, why they stay in broken marriages, why they vote for tyrants, why they join cults. Because even a cruel person who seems certain feels safer than a kind person who's clearly lost. That's the shadow play, and Reddington is fluent in it. He doesn't manipulate because he enjoys it. He manipulates because he knows people don't want the truth. They want the feeling of truth. They want certainty, even if it's manufactured. So he gives them what they crave, while quietly doing what actually matters. This makes him lonely, but it also makes him free. And freedom always looks dangerous to those still living in cages they can't see. So now the question changes. Not just, why is Reddington like this? But, why aren't we all more like this? Why do we settle for shallow safety instead of dangerous truth? Why do we fear darkness more than dishonesty? Maybe it's not Reddington who needs therapy. Maybe it's the world around it.
You don't escape a prison by decorating your cell. You escape by admitting you're imprisoned in the first place. That's the rebellion, not guns, not riots, not speeches. It begins in the mind, when you start dismantling the lies that keep you tame. Raymond Reddington doesn't just live outside the law. He lives outside the mental conditioning most people never question. That's his true rebellion. He's not a fugitive from justice. He's a fugitive from conformity. But here's the catch. He didn't start that way. Reddington was once a U.S. Navy officer. A golden boy. A patriot. He knew the rules. He played by them. And then something happened. Something broke. Something snapped. The story is hazy. By design. He never tells it the same way twice. That's the point. It's not the event that matters. It's what it unlocked. A fracture. A betrayal. A realization that the system he served wasn't noble. It was hollow. That the people he trusted weren't loyal. They were scared. That his identity wasn't real. It was inherited.
So he burned it down, and he didn't look back. That's what most people fear the most. Not death, not pain, but identity collapse. The realization that who you've been your entire life was a costume tailored for survival, not truth. You're told to be honest, but only in acceptable ways. You're told to be kind, but never confrontational. You're told to be free, but only if your freedom fits the mold. Reddington's rebellion begins the moment he stops trying to fit. He doesn't need permission to exist. You can feel the shift in him. He stops asking, what should I do? He starts asking, what matters? That question is radioactive. It melts every false structure. Suddenly you stop caring about what's polite. You stop living for approval. You stop performing and start observing. That's the first step to breaking free. Kill the performance, not in public, in private. Start noticing the scripts you follow. Why do you say, I'm fine, when you're breaking? Why do you nod in meetings when you disagree? Why do you post smiling photos when you're numb? Because deep down, you've been trained to fear your own truth. Reddington doesn't. He tells people exactly what they mean to him. He confronts betrayal face first. He grieves openly. He loves without apology. And when he manipulates, he does it strategically, not to control but to navigate a corrupt landscape. He's not a saint. He's strategic. He plays the game because he knows the game is real but broken. And that leads us to the second step of rebellion. Accept the darkness, not indulge it, not glorify it. Accept it. You have rage. You have jealousy. You have selfishness. But you also have loyalty, clarity, hunger, intuition. The parts of you society labels bad are often just misdirected power. Reddington accepts his darkness, not because he enjoys it, but because he knows it's real. He doesn't suppress it, he redirects it. He turns anger into justice. He turns grief into wisdom. He turns manipulation into leverage. This is Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow. Not denying it, not erasing it, but understanding it. And once you do that, something strange happens. You stop fearing yourself. That's what most people don't realize. The fear they carry isn't of the world. It's of their own potential, their own capacity for intensity, for power, for decisiveness. When you suppress your shadow, you live small. When you integrate it, you become unshakable. That's the third stage of the rebellion. Build your own code. Reddington doesn't follow the law, but he does follow principles. He protects those who protect others. He honors loyalty. He punishes betrayal, but only when it matters. He walks away from battles that don't serve a purpose. This is existentialism in practice. Sartre said freedom is terrifying because it means you're responsible for everything you choose. There's no script, no God handing out rules, no system to blame. Reddington embraces that. He doesn't want someone else's blueprint. He writes his own, and you can too. What if you stopped outsourcing morality? What if you stopped waiting for permission to live on your terms? The world isn't going to hand you clarity. You have to forge it yourself. That's what Reddington teaches, without ever saying it outright. It's in the way he pauses before making a decision, in the way he looks someone in the eye and tells them the truth they didn't ask for, in the way he never apologizes for surviving. He's not free because he's dangerous. He's dangerous because he's free. But here's the twist most people miss. Reddington doesn't want you to become like him. He wants you to become you, fully, painfully, vividly. He just knows you'll have to go through hell to do it. So now the rebellion is in your hand. You can keep pretending, keep curating your image, keep swallowing your rage and shrinking your presence. Or you can step into the wild, dark unknown, where rules blur. But something deeper awaits. Your real voice, your real values, your real self. That's what freedom is. Not comfort, not safety, but wholeness. And once you taste it, you'll never go back. There comes a moment, quiet, terrifying, irreversible, when you realize you are not who you thought you were. Not the version you show the world. Not the story you've told yourself to survive. Not the mask you've spent years perfecting. You are something else. Something older, wilder, deeper, and in that moment, everything fractures. But that fracture isn't destruction. It's revelation. And that's the moment Raymond Reddington lives in. Permanently. You think he's cold because he kills. You think he's dangerous because he lies. But look closer. What if the reason he seems untouchable is because he has already died? Not physically, psychologically, spiritually. The man he once was, the patriot, the naval officer, the father, was burned to ash. And from that ash rose something new, not reborn, reforged. That's the ultimate truth. Reddington isn't the villain. He's what remains after you lose everything. Tell the truth about it and survive. Most people think becoming whole means adding pieces, learning more, getting better, building yourself up. But wholeness doesn't come from adding. It comes from shedding. Shedding the false identities. Shedding the inherited beliefs. Shedding the parts of you that were designed to please people who never really saw you. And that shedding, it hurts like hell, because it's not a clean process. It's brutal. You bleed. You doubt. You lose people. You find out who your real friends are. You look in the mirror and don't recognize what's staring back. And if you're strong or lucky, what comes next is something Reddington has mastered. A life lived by essence, not by expectation. He doesn't belong anywhere, and yet he belongs fully wherever he is. He can sit at a crime lord's table or cradle a dying friend and be equally present. That's not duality, that's unity. He's stopped dividing himself into acceptable versus unacceptable, and the world can feel it. He doesn't walk into a room seeking power. He is power. Not because he's fearless, but because he's not fragmented. That's the part people don't understand. His power isn't in his weapons, it's in his wholeness. There's a line he once said, "There is nothing that can take the pain away, but eventually you will find a way to live with it." That's not comfort, that's truth. We spend our lives trying to escape pain. Reddington lives with it, holds it, lets it shape him without letting it own him. This is the alchemy of suffering. When pain doesn't just scar you, it reveals you. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Reddington is chaos, but he's also the star. Not because he conquered the darkness, but because he embraced it without letting it destroy his soul. That's the final realization. The shadow isn't the enemy. It's the door and the people who walk through it. The ones who survive the fire don't come back righteous. They come back real. And that's why Reddington haunts people. Because once you see what he is, you realize what you could be if you stopped lying to yourself. He's the answer to the question we've danced around this whole time. What would it look like if you were fully awake in a world built on sleepwalking? It would look like a man who wears $3,000 suits and doesn't give a damn about your opinion. It would look like someone who speaks in parables, not to confuse you, but to bypass your defenses. It would look like a criminal who protects innocence with more integrity than the system ever did. It would look like grief worn like a second skin, not hidden away in shame. It would look like freedom that doesn't need to be explained because it's lived. Reddington's genius isn't strategic, it's existential. He doesn't just make deals, he makes people see themselves. He doesn't just destroy enemies, he destroys illusions. And maybe that's what we need most. Not more heroes, but more destroyers of illusion. Because in a world where everyone's pretending, the most radical act is to be real. So now the mirror turns toward you. You followed Reddington through the labyrinth, watched him manipulate, love, betray, protect, destroy, and mourn. You've seen the carnage. You've heard the poetry. You've felt the ache. And now you have to ask, What if the very thing you fear becoming is what you have to become to finally be free? What if becoming a better person isn't about being nicer, calmer, more agreeable, but about being braver? Brave enough to see your shadow, brave enough to walk into the fire, brave enough to lose yourself and come back whole. That's the ultimate truth, not because Reddington says it, but because he lives it. And if you're ready, you can too. Not by becoming him, but by becoming you, without apology. No more pretending, no more hiding, no more waiting for permission. This is your fire now. This is your mirror, and somewhere in the ashes, the real you is waiting to be born.